Our God is still on his throne and ruling the affairs of man. Even as he does not change, his truths have not changed. Thankfully, God still has a people which proclaim that old-time religion, setting forth his sovereignty, and the old paths of truth where we can find rest for our souls. Welcome to Word of Sovereign Grace, a ministry of Paradise Primitive Baptist Church in Arlington, Texas. Get your Bible, call your friends, and sit back as we open the King James Scriptures to explore the glorious Word of Sovereign Grace. Here's this week's message.
We look at Noah's experience in Hebrews 11:7, and it says, by faith Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet. God warned Noah ahead of time of some things Noah hadn't seen yet. But what did Noah do? By faith Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, prepared an ark to the saving of his house. Now that says that God warned Noah ahead of time of some things Noah had not seen as yet. And because of the warning God gave him, Noah built the ark. Noah did something about it. Someone might say, well, if you just had enough faith, you wouldn't be afraid of those evil things out here in the future. Look at that verse again. Here's a man that has faith and he had fear at the same time. My wife and I were driving out of Birmingham, Alabama last August, and there was a great big church that had a marquee or a billboard out in front of it, and it says, faith and fear cannot live in the same house. I told the wife, I said, I could destroy that with one verse. We come back to the verse I'm giving in Hebrews chapter 11. By faith, Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear. That man Noah had faith, and he had fear, and his fear moved him to do something. The Bible teaches us in place after place after place that life is very short. Now that's hard to convince young people. It's sometimes hard to convince middle-aged people. You have young people, middle-aged people that waste everything they make, never considering that they'll come over here to the end of the way and maybe find themselves in great need over here at the end of life's way. The Bible teaches us that life is very short. You go to the 14th chapter of Job, verse 1, and Job says, man that is born of woman is a few days and full of trouble. That's what he says. To a young person, the idea of living 60 or 70 or maybe 80 years, that looks like a long, long, long time out here in the future. But to a person that's lived 80 years, an 80-year life is just like a little dream you had in the night. 80 years slips away from it just like that. 90 years slips away from it. David, when he was an old man, said, my days are like a handbreadth. He says, my lifetime on this earth doesn't seem any wider than a handbreadth. And he tells us in the 90th Psalm, he says, a man's life is like a tale that is told. It's like somebody sits down and tells you a short story. This story has a beginning, it's got a few points to it, and after a while, this tale or this story comes to an end. He said, a man's life is like a tale that's told. And David says that since a man's life is like a tale that is told, he says, so teach us to number our days that we may apply our hearts to wisdom. And most all of us have been in circumstances where you went into a grocery store, maybe you went to the picture show, or you took a trip, and you maybe had just enough money to get there and back, or you had not quite enough money to go around, so you had to count your money beforehand. Now, I don't find too many people complaining about having too much money, and most folks I know have to count their money. You realize that the Bible tells me that I should count my days on earth just like you count your money? Here's a poor person, or maybe a person not so poor, and you've got more bills here than your paycheck will cover, and you certainly have to count your money. He says, teach us to number our days. We need to be numbering our days on this earth so we can realize how frail we are. We even find Solomon in the 12th chapter of Ecclesiastes. He warns the young man, Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 1. He says, remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth. I've said thousands of times, that's written to a child of God. You know how I know it's written to a child of God? Because a person cannot remember something they've never known. I cannot remember somebody I never met. The only people I can remember are people I knew already. I could not come up and teach you a brand new fact and you say, oh, I remember that. The only person that can remember their Creator is somebody that knows their Creator. That's written to a child of God. Solomon says, remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, because he warns this young man that there's some worse days coming upon him. Remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. There will come a time to every young person on this earth that the things that give you pleasure will not give you pleasure anymore. Motorcycle rides and buying foods and going to the Pizza Hut and movies and entertainment and the things that give you pleasure, or kicks as some people call them, one of these days they won't give you any pleasure anymore. He says, remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them, while the sun or the light of the moon or the stars be not darkened, nor the clouds return after the rain. You say, well, what in the world does Solomon mean by telling this young man that one of these days there will come a time in your life that the clouds will return after the rain? Well, every wheat farmer, every man that ever tried to bale hay or work on the farm knows this. That maybe you've got hay to bale or you've got wheat to harvest, and you get started to work, and here comes a little rain. And that rain puts you out of business. And you shut everything down for a while, and the sun comes out, and you say, oh, glory to God, the sun's out. And when everything dries out, I'll get back to work. My problem is solved. The rain is over. And I'll get back to work when everything dries out. Then the man goes out there and he starts back to work, and about the time he starts back to work, here's a cloud that comes right behind the rain. Another cloud follows that one. He's warning that young man that there will come a time in your life when the clouds will return after the rain. You have the rain, and then the sunshine comes out for a while. Then here comes another cloud, and here's more rain. He's warning that young man to remember thy Creator in the days of thy youth. Get as close to the things of God as you possibly can, because there's coming a time in your life when you solve one problem, here will come another one. And certainly anybody that's ever lived very long in this life knows that it's that way. I've told you maybe this before, but my wife and I married so very, very young that once upon a time when our 3 children were very small, we started adding up, how young we would be, not how old we would be, but how young we would be when they all graduated and left home. And we could just see that, about the time we turned 40 or early 40s, we'd just be free spirits and wouldn't have any problems. There's one of the things we hadn't counted on. We hadn't counted on one of them being handicapped. Another thing we hadn't counted on is about the time you get and some of you young people here maybe just looking forward to the day when you get your children through school and maybe get them through college, just say everything will lighten up on me then. It will not. Because about that time, your parents start getting real old, and they start needing some help. And if you don't have parents that start getting old, their health fails, and it's your responsibility, according to the Bible, to try to help them. And if that doesn't solve it, why, along will come some grandchildren, and next thing you know, you'll have a house full of grandkids ricocheting off the walls, and swinging on the light fixtures, and good old grandma gets to be a babysitter again, and all that type of thing. It has been my experience in the ministry that just about the time I fight one battle and get it solved, and say, well, I'd like for things to get dull for a while, here comes something else. So I have just about come to the conclusion that that's what this life is all about anyhow. I hear people every once in a while will make reference to some terrible headline or something that happened, and they'll say, that's just not fair. Well, now, wait a minute. Who ever said that things in this world are supposed to be fair anyhow? Who ever said that? The things in this world have not been fair, and they haven't been right since Adam fell and brought sin into the world. I hear people say all the time, well, that's not right. Here's so-and-so over here, they have so much, and they have so plenty, and here's somebody over here that's had such a hard life, that's not right, that's not fair. Who says things in this world are supposed to be fair? Where is the verse in the Bible that says things in this world are supposed to be fair? Well, Job says over here, Job chapter 14, verse 1, man that is born of woman is a few days and full of trouble. Says he cometh forth like a flower. What in the world does that mean? Says he comes forth like a flower. This can also apply to a young lady. Says he comes forth just like a flower. Well, we can understand that in springtime. There have been times I've left home and maybe been gone less than a week, and come back in the springtime and just couldn't believe the changes taking place. Maybe you get real busy and you don't pay much attention to what's going on in the flower beds and out in the pastures and everything. You don't pay much attention to it, and just ignore what nature's doing in the springtime for about a week, and you can be greatly surprised. It seems like that the flowers of springtime just come forth just like that. Well, that's the way a young man or a young woman comes forth. You've got a little girl on your hands, you've got a little boy on your hands, and then overnight you've got a young man or a young lady who says they come forth like a flower. But look at the rest of it. It says that he's cut down like a shadow. Came into this world, developed into a man real quick, spends his life, and says he's just cut down like a shadow. Job goes on in that same chapter and says, there's hope of a tree. Job chapter 14 says there's hope of a tree if the tree's cut down. We take a tree, cut it right off level with the ground. He says there's hope of a tree that through the water, through the scent of water, the moisture, that it will blossom and bud and come forth again. Well, we've all experienced that. We've seen trees, or maybe you cut trees down and you thought they were gone forever. And maybe right in the very center of that old rotten stump, that tree will blossom out again, and you'll see there's still life in the stalk of it. He says there's hope of a tree. Cut a tree down, says that tree might live again, or it might show that it's still got life. But he says in the 10th verse of chapter 14, but man dieth. Man dieth, and man giveth up the ghost, and where is he? Now that's a very interesting question. Job asked this question in that same chapter. If a man dies, shall he live again? Then he answers his question, and he says, all the days of my appointed time will I wait. I'll wait until my change comes. Job goes on in the rest of that chapter and tells us that there will be a resurrection. He says man will live again, but notice what he emphasizes. He says our days on this earth are very short. So Solomon warns this young man over here to remember thou thy Creator in the days of thy youth. He says there's coming some days in your life when the clouds will return after the rain. You'll solve this problem, then here'll come another problem. And he warns that young man to remember his Creator before the day comes when he says the keepers of the house shall tremble. And that house there has no reference to a house like you live in or to this meeting house. That house is the house of this body. The Apostle Paul says in 2 Corinthians 5 verse 1, and for we know that if our earthly house of this tabernacle were dissolved, we have a building of God eternal in the heavens not made with hands. This body is a house. 2 Corinthians 5:1. And the Lord gave us a nervous system to keep this house, to control it. The central, peripheral, autonomic nervous system, and through the nervous system I keep the house. I wave my hand, I walk, I've got the reflexes of the nervous system. That's the keepers of the house. And not only counting that's voluntary that I have some control over, but the involuntary functions that make me breathe and digest my food. But he says there's coming a day, young man, when the keepers of the house shall tremble. The nervous system that God gave to keep and regulate this house, it'll begin to shake. He said there's coming a day when strong men shall bow themselves. It's interesting to watch people as they age. Here's that young fella or young lady that's once very square-shouldered, and as they get older, they begin to bow themselves. He says the keepers of the house shall tremble. That man's nervous system will break down. He'll get more shaky. It says the strong man will bow themselves. The grinders shall cease because they're few. The old millstone, or the old mill rather, had two stones. It had the upper stone and the nether stone. My grandfather operated a mill in Arkansas for years. I've been to some of these old mills in Virginia and the mountain parts of the world. And here's the upper and the lower and nether millstone. That's the grinders. Well, the Lord gave you 32 grinders right here. Your upper and lower teeth. And as time goes by, the grinders are pulled, or the grinders fall out. And he says the grinders shall cease because they're few. And then the man usually has to go buy him a set of grinders. He says those that look out the windows be darkened. The eyes are the windows of the soul. God gave me two little windows here with which I can see the world. But after a while, the windows get darker. So the man or woman puts on glasses. Then the glasses become bifocals, and bifocals become trifocals. And with some folks, they wind up as thick as the bottom of a Coke bottle. And then maybe a person like that has got to use a magnifying glass in addition to it. Because it's natural with folks as we get older that our eyesight fails. He goes on and tells him that the sound of the grinding shall be low. That mill down yonder is grinding as loud as it did when he's a youngster. But in his mind, he says, you know, that old mill's not as loud as it used to be. Oh, yes, it is. The man drives tractors or operates chainsaws operates loud machinery till he begins to run his hearing, and he says the machinery's not as loud as it used to be. It's as loud as ever. He just can't hear like he used to. The Bible also tells us that fear shall be in the way. People that once had the courage to travel all over the country get afraid to leave home. We can't leave home. Somebody break into the house. The cats will get hungry. The house might catch fire. We can't dare go away from home because one of the children might come by. We cannot go to church today because there's a little cloud over there 10 miles away about the size of a man's hand, and that little cloud undoubtedly will cause some kind of a big rain before we get back from church. We can't do that today. We might have car trouble. People that used to take out and go all over the country with maybe nothing but gas money in their hip pockets, now they're afraid to take a trip to town. Anything you mention to them, fear gets in the way. Fear shall be in the way of every plan they make. And he says, that person will be afraid of that which is high. The man that climbed trees and climbed oil derricks and put on roofs is now afraid to go down the steps of church or get up on a step ladder. He'll be afraid of high places. He tells us fear shall be in the way. He'll be afraid of that which is high. The grinding will be low because he's losing his hearing. And he says, all the daughters of music shall be brought low. That individual's no longer interested in listening to the symphony records or to the fine music he used to enjoy because he can't hear all the parts anymore. The Bible tells us that the almond tree shall flourish. I've walked through almond groves in California. When they flourish, they turn white. The man's hair turns gray. And he says, he shall rise up at the voice of the bird. It's a nature with folks as they get older, most of them, they'll get up earlier, and it doesn't take near as much to wake them. As soon as the rooster crows in the morning, folks want to get out of bed, whether they got anything to do or not. I've known old Primitive Baptist dairy farmers that would get up at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning for 50 years to milk the cows. They'd tell me, they'd say, when I sell my dairy out, I'm going to get me some sleep and sleep till about 9 o'clock. They don't. You go spend the night with them while you're preaching a meeting, and I mean they've got the coffee on at 4 a.m. Because people get older, they sleep less. They sleep lighter. They rise up at the voice of a bird. And he tells us that in that condition, he says, finally, the mourners go about the streets. You know what that is? That's your funeral procession. The mourners go about the streets, and he says the silver cord will be loosed. The silver cord is that connection between the spirit and soul and the body. Here's the life of my body. You people look at me right now, I'm alive. You say, well, you're alive because your flesh is warm and you've got a glow in your eyes. But you see, according to the Bible, this body is not me. I live down in it. It's just a part of me. That's why the Apostle Paul says in Philippians chapter 1, nevertheless, to abide in the flesh is more needful for you. He told the church it's more needful for you that I abide in the flesh. Well, I abide in that house across the road. As the colored fellow says, I stays there. But that house across the road's not me. I just abide in it. You folks have got houses you abide in. You abide in the house, but the house is not all there is to you. The Apostle Paul says, nevertheless, to abide in the flesh. I just live in this mess. The Apostle Peter says in 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 12 through 14, 15, he says, knowing this, that I think it meet that as long as I'm in this tabernacle, I'll stir you up. He says, knowing that shortly I'm going to cast off this tabernacle. If this body here, this tabernacle of flesh, is all there is to me, how can I cast it off? But Peter says he's going to cast it off. Now notice this. And the person that's within me that dwells in this tabernacle has got a connection with it that the ancient people described as a silver cord. And when the soul and spirit departs the body like so, and that's what happens when somebody dies, that silver cord finally breaks. He says the silver cord be broken. He says the golden bowl will be broken. That golden bowl's your mind. And in the human mind, in the minds of people today, are more facts than you can store in massive computers. Because computers don't love. Computers don't love. They don't rejoice. Computers do not think. My son David's a professor in it, worked with them about 11 years. They don't think. There's an old motto in computer work, G-I-G-O, garbage in, garbage out. Any computer expert knows that. You put garbage in one, you get garbage back out. The greatest computer that's ever been made on this earth is nothing to be compared with the potentialities of your mind. You think of the hundreds of people you know, you think of the thousands of things that you have experienced, you think of some man that in his lifetime has had thoughts on thousands of scriptures. You think of some professor over here that has packed his mind with knowledge. You think of some man like Lyndon Johnson that met thousands of people in his lifetime and influenced people all over this world, had all kinds of connections. And you think about all the human knowledge that died with Lyndon Johnson. Or take somebody like Brother Strickland. Here's a person here with a lifetime of experience. And it's up here in the mind, the golden bowl. And he says there comes a time when that golden bowl breaks. That man doesn't need that natural knowledge anymore. Says the wheel be broken at the cistern. Watch this. And he says the wind-up of that matter is that the man goes back to dust and the spirit goes back to God that gave it. You know what he's doing to that young man? He's telling that young man to remember his Creator, not in order to go to heaven, because he's already a child of God, or how could he remember his Creator? But he's telling him to remember his Creator so he can have a more enjoyable life and a more God-honoring life here. The alien doesn't remember his Creator because he's never known his Creator. Psalms 10:4 says, the wicked through the pride of his countenance will not seek after God. God's not in all his thoughts. It's God's people need to remember. And God's people need to remember before these evil days come. I will spend the rest of my time up here this morning talking to you about some preparations that God's people need to make for death. And I'm not talking about and will not say one thing about something you do to prepare to go to heaven in immortal glory. The Lord's already done that for you. I'm talking about something to face death. You say, well, I don't want to talk about that. Somebody will have to talk about it. I've had lots of experience in the ministry with people that would not face the fact that they're going to die one of these days. They didn't want to face death. They didn't want to look at death. They didn't want to study about their death. Don't want to talk about it. But I wound up having to talk about it a lot. Dying in this world is not easy. You say, oh, dying's simple. You just fall over and die. Dying is very simple on the part of the person who dies. But it is not simple on the part of your loved ones or your pastor or people come along behind you. And I've got a little advice for you. It's complicated enough to die out here in Young County. I mean, there's all kinds. A lot of you folks here have no idea. If you died right now, what would have to be done in just a few hours? I mean, like that. Oh, you wouldn't have to do it. We all know that. But it'd have to be done in just a few hours. And I thought taking care of the legal work and technical work and all that was complicated enough here in Young County. But be sure you don't ever die in Dallas County. Dallas County, I've known for years, is no place to live. I found out lately it's no place to die. Because they've got all kinds of rules and regulations. Rules and regulations. I started down the other morning, 10 o'clock in the morning. And I wasn't through till 4 o'clock that afternoon. Doing the stitch work, legal preparations, and everything else so that my mother could be buried the following Friday. You say, I don't talk about death. Somebody will have to talk about it. Somebody will have to talk about it. Your children will have to talk about it. Your loved ones will have to talk about it. And if you're like some folks and you don't have any children, don't have any close relatives, there'll have to be a pastor or a friend to talk about it. It's something we might as well face. Listen, I want to talk to you about some things that are all a part of our experience in life. Part of our experience in life involves being born. I don't think I've got to prove that point. That's part of our experience, is being born. Here was a time And your parents over here usually have about 9 months, 8 to 9 months, to make preparations for that baby being born. I've seen young couples run out here and buy hospitalization insurance for one reason only, in case they have a child. Well, that never made a lot of sense to me. Because you've got at least 8 or 9 months to get ready for that some way. You can buy, beg, borrow. I won't put steel in there since we're Christian people. But you've got about 8 or 9 months to get ready for that. I'll tell you why folks might ought to better buy hospitalization insurance. It's this catastrophe stuff, like cancer and stroke and such as that. Folks will run out and buy it just because they say, well, we might have a family someday, so we better get us some hospitalization. Might have a family someday. Well, that's fine. Go ahead and do that. But after all, you've got about 8 or 9 months to get ready for that. Now watch this. I have watched my wife 3 times in this life. I've watched lots of folks in churches over the land. The news would come, there's going to be a little addition to the family. And you make all kinds of preparation for a person being born in the world. Buy little clothes, if you buy little clothes, maybe a little crib. Make all kinds of preparations. Try to have, diapers, clothes, half the things ready for a person to be born in the world. We make preparations for somebody to be born in the world. Now there comes another time. That's the time when you get married. Well, it's sort of expected that when a young man and young lady plan to get married, it's not a matter you say, I do, I'll marry you now, and get married 5 seconds later. Usually, most folks put a little planning into the wedding or the marriage. They usually tell a few folks. I won't say this is true in every case, but usually, if folks are real serious about marriage, they'll have an engagement period beforehand, and they make some preparations and plans. They make some preparations for marriage. Now, there's another experience of life. As a part of life, that's death. And by the way, you chiropractor and therapy brethren, the medical doctor's got you sewed up all the way around. You're not born in the world till the medical doctor says you are. Now, you may be there screaming your lungs out, but he's got to say you're born before you're born. And you can't legally get married without one. And you can't legally die without one. My mother breathed her last about 5 a.m. It's obvious she'd gone on to be of the Lord. And my wife went over to this big window and pulled the curtain back. Had a beautiful view out there on the 4th floor. It's a beautiful view. But we kept the curtains shut because it didn't need the light in my mother's eyes. And my mother died a little past 5, and my wife said, well, it doesn't matter anyway. It won't bother me long now. So she pulls the curtain way back. And about the time when the sun, that's before they, switched this time. Isn't this a blessing? Back before we, had their time switched. About daylight on the old 5 o'clock, Brother Irby self used to refer to one as God's time, the other as man's time, and I forgot which we're on now. We switched it back and forth so much. He used to say, this is God's time, and that other is man's time, and we switched this so much over the years, I don't remember which we're on right now. But I'd be sure this is all God's time. You can be sure of that. But anyway, about a few minutes after my mother passed away and the sun started coming up, there were just hundreds of birds right outside that window up in the sky, and they were just flying in V formations and making all kinds of whirls, and they weren't moving anywhere else. They were just right there in that window. Right, you can see them outside that window. Just hundreds of them out there in the sky, just swirling and beating, and just like planes on parade. And my mother told me, my wife rather, told me later, I wasn't there at the time. But she said the Lord really put on an air show for Meemaw about the time her breath went out of her. Well, that did me good. It seemed like the birds out there in the sky. The Lord just seemed to bring hundreds of them right there, right outside that window. And they were just doing this way and that way in all kinds of formations. They weren't doing it anywhere else. Well, that made me feel good. It's obvious to my wife, the soul and the spirit went out of my mother about, say, 30 or 45 minutes before the MD got there. But he had to pronounce her dead before she's dead. Got to have an MD to be born. Got to have one to get married. You got to have one to die. They got you sewed up all the way around, haven't they? With a fat hog in a good garden, those guys ought to be able to make a living, oughtn't they? the certainty of death and the uncertainty of life. The uncertainty of life and the certainty of death. That's a great statement. There is nothing any more certain than death, and there's nothing any more uncertain than life. The Bible speaks of an untimely birth, and it speaks of an untimely death. The very next people in this congregation to pass away could very well be the youngest. I will say this to frighten people. I'll be very candid with you. A young wife or a young husband that loses a loved one through an accident, when some young man or some young woman is lost, taken away, quite often that is a greater, harder situation than when somebody lived many years. I have been appalled. I've been shocked in my travels among the primitive Baptists, that primitive Baptist sisters that were 75 and 80 years of age, that would, like my grandmothers, you know, my mothers in the church, 75 and 80-year-old sisters would call me back in the kitchen or talk to me privately and tell me, Brother Sonny, see if you can't get my husband to draw up a will, because if he is to die, I'd be in the biggest mess on the face of the earth. And I know of one case of a minister way up in his 80s. And this minister was a wise man, and he didn't have a will. And his children had tried to talk to him about it. And he got mad at every one of his children for talking to him about it. And here's his wife here, old enough to be my grandmother, begging me to talk to him about the importance of drawing up a will. I told her, I said, well, I'll try to preach it into it. So I preached it into him. Would you believe that? I got up and preached a little bit on it, and next week he took her to a lawyer's office and finally drew a will up. Every man ought to have a will. You say, well, I'm real young and I don't have anything. Listen, I'm going to tell you something for free that a lawyer will charge you for telling you. The little bit that a poor family has got needs to be protected a lot more than the whole lot that a rich family's got. Now I want to go over that again. Let's suppose here's a rich man that's got a estate of $500,000. And this rich man doesn't have a will, and he doesn't have his business fixed up. And maybe it cost his family $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 to straighten his business up. Maybe because of bad managing, they have to pay a lot of estate taxes and a lot of legal things that they would not have to have paid if he'd arranged his business right. All right, this family can spend $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 and not be hurt. Here's a poor family over here, and maybe all they got is $1,000 or $2,000 in assets if they sold everything. To a poor family like that, to spend $250 or $300 settling their business is a harder lick than it would be for this rich family over here to spend $50,000. I don't think I have to explain that to smart people. I mean, if all you've got is $1,000 in the world, and you had to pay a lawyer $200, let's just talk in terms of men now. Let's say some of you men out here, all you have is $1,000 worth of life insurance, or by the time your debts are paid off, get paid off, your family's left with $1,000 after your debt's paid off. And then your will had to be processed in such a way that it cost your family $250. That $250 is a harder lick to a family that only had $1,000 left over to start with than $50,000 would be to a family that had $500,000. Poor people need a will more than rich people. The little bit that a poor man has got needs to be protected more than the whole lot that a rich man's got. Because that rich family can use to hire lawyers and people like that to do it for them. Next thing. Folks just don't face this. I don't know how many old primitive Baptist preachers I've known over this country were wise men that never drew a will. You know, next thing it'll do? It produces, lots of times produces fighting among the children. You say, oh no, my children aren't like that. Oh no, when I die, they'll gather together and honorably and peaceably settle it. As my daughter Lynn says, it's time for you to wake up and smell the coffee. I hope they'll honorably and peaceably settled it, but I know of some who haven't. I know of some who have fought over pictures, and fought over spoons, and fought over greeting cards. It's better for people to start assigning where they want those things gone in your lifetime. Because there might be some books or little rinky-dink things. If your dad says, I want you to have this, your sister to have this, your sister, you say, well, that's what Dad wants or Mom wants, fine. I really wanted that cross-eyed frog, that Dad bought at the state fair 50 years ago. I really wanted Dad's cross-eyed frog, but if he wants to give it to my sister, okay. That's better than you and the sister fighting over the cross-eyed frog. Now the next thing. A lot of folks don't realize how expensive it is to die. It's very expensive to die. And burial insurance is very, very cheap. And it is expensive to die. A lot of folks won't face that. It's going to cost somebody to die. I want to look at something else. We ought to be considerate of things like this. I've had folks over the country, back when I was younger, before I learned better, somebody hear me preach somewhere, somebody I knew real well, say, Brother Sonny, I want you to preach the funeral, and when I die, I want you to preach the funeral, and I'm going to set a certain song. Well, maybe their relatives weren't Primitive Baptists, and every Primitive Baptist preacher I've ever talked to on this subject has had the same experience I have. Maybe their relatives aren't Primitive Baptists. And then that good old Primitive Baptist dies, and none of their relatives belong to the church. And am I supposed to run over to their house and say, hey, I'm supposed to preach this funeral? There's no way on earth I can do that. I had 4 or 5 cases back when I first started preaching. That good old Primitive Baptist folks tell me they want me preaching funerals, I don't know what they wanted, and such and such. Then those people would pass away, and they'd have relatives that didn't care any more about their old Baptist church than Hog does Sunday. I didn't have any time. They went ahead and arranged it themselves. After I learned, though, for the last 20-some-odd years, when folks come up and start telling me that, I tell them, I say, you write down what you want. Write it all out. And tell somebody in your family to write it all out. Get this understood. Even go down to the funeral home and arrange it. That's a very intelligent thing, is to go to the funeral home and arrange your own funeral. You say, oh, I'm real young. Yes, but I be method realizing the uncertainty of life and the certainty of death. The youngest people in this congregation may be the very next to go. Also, my friends, there's going to come a time when all of us will come to the end of the way. It may be, for me, it may be before this day is out. I may live another 40 years. I don't know when it is. God knows, and I don't. So we ought to try to stay on a friendly basis with those we love. We ought to try to settle our differences, get along with folks. If we've got anybody we need to apologize to, we ought to do our apologizing while we live. This little story I'm fixing to tell you was told to me for the truth, and I could probably do a little traces back and dig up the characters involved. Well, I'd probably have to really dig them up because I figured they'd never gone. But anyway, this story is based on truth. As far as I know, it's totally the truth, because the people that told it to me named the people involved. There's a couple of men live right side by side with each other, and they fussed and fought over property lines, over water wells. They fought and fought and fought over everything. All they ever did was fight. And finally, one of them wound up in the hospital nearly dead. And the one he fussed and fought with all his life went in to see him. And the one that was nearly dying looked at his neighbor, and he said, listen. He said, in case I die, I won't apologize to you. I'll apologize to you in case I die. And in case I die, it's all forgiven and it's all settled, and I want to die at peace with you in case I die. But he says, in the event I get well and live, it's just the same as it's always been. Now, my friends, that's the way lots of folks operate. That's the way a lot of folks operate. I have had some very, very, very close experiences with folks that would browbeat a companion, treat them cruel, never give them a kind word. I mean, carry on, gripe. I mean, groan, complain, browbeat, persecute, humiliate somebody. I mean, night and day. And just as soon as somebody dies, that person was the perfect wife, the queen of the earth, and oh, I love them so. And now all of a sudden I'm getting hours and hours and hours and hours of mush that I don't believe, that 5 minutes of it would have helped the dead person. When you have spent most of your life trying to preach, and time and time and time again you stand here at the head of a casket, and you hear people coming by apologizing to a dead corpse. You hear somebody come by, boo-hoo-hoo, mama. I wish I'd have come to see you more. I wish I'd have this. I wish I'd have that. I'm sorry, Mother, for the way I did you. I'm sorry for the way I did you, Daddy. And I was wrong and all that. And I haven't seen you in 5 years, and I'm so sorry. Apologizing to a dead corpse. Somebody says, oh, that's a hard way to put it. Well, it's hard anyhow. Apologizing. I have heard all kinds of compliments, all kinds of tributes. I've seen husbands that never gave a wife a kind word when they're dead. I boo-hoo-hoo, you know. Finest woman never lived. Oh, she is my sweetie pie. And if I could resurrect them from the dead and bring them back to them, it wouldn't be 12 hours till they'd be treating them just like they did before. I've known cases of married couples where a wife would be browbeating the husband, or husband would be browbeating the wife on the day they died. Then when it's all over with, it's my sweet wife. It's my precious husband. And they're fussing and fighting maybe right up to the last time they ever together. My friends, the time to make your apologies, to make your amends, to undo things, to get things right is while people are living. That's the time to do it. Now, this is going to sound real hard too, but I'm going to throw that ball right across the plate. I figured out something about 20 years ago, just based on observation. Oh, I guess it's about 20 years ago. I started studying the way families would behave at funerals. And I came to a conclusion. And just a few days ago, a couple of days ago, I was visiting with Elder Ray Piles. And he came to the same conclusion and asked an old funeral director down in Arkansas, a man that been in the business many, many years, and Ray asked this funeral director the same question many years ago. I came to the conclusion on my own, just from watching people, that usually, I didn't say in every case, I know there are exceptions, but in most cases, or usually, the children that weep and wail and carry on the most at a funeral were those that had the worst relationship with the parent or did the least for them. I didn't say that's true in every case. It's usually that way. Usually the man that weeps and wails and carries on most when his wife dies, his man really wasn't a good husband to her anyhow. Usually that's right. Now I know there's a natural grief. There's a grief I expect out of folks. There's a grief that's to be expected. I came to that conclusion years ago watching families. I stand back and watch families that have 7, 8, 9 children, or 5 children. There's some of them would have what I will call normal or natural amount of grief. I'm not against that. You see those that, that shed tears, they're hurt, they're entitled to that. We should be hurt. You see those that, like I tried to express it, would have the type of grief you'd expect. Then there were those that would yell and weep and wail. I've seen people faint on the floor, come in a room to view a body, faint on the floor. I mean, have to fall on their husbands, just putting on all kinds of Academy Award-winning performances. And my dear friends, as I would study those people, that son or daughter that tried to help mom and dad while they were living, they'd be shedding tears, all right, but usually those that's coming apart are those that either didn't do what they ought to or did something they shouldn't. Usually it's that way. Ray Powell was telling me about a few years ago, preaching a funeral for a large family, and he knew the family very well. And there were members of the family that we'd say they had, the normal amount of grief that you'd expect. Certainly there's nothing wrong with that. But there were others that were just in a state of hysteria. And Ray asked that old funeral director, he says, isn't it strange how families react? How is Now some of them can take it so well, and others can just be torn all to pieces. He said, Brother Piles said, we know in our business that usually comes from a feeling of guilt or a failure to have done that should have been done. I didn't say that's true in every case, but usually it is. You want to brace yourself to be able to take your mom and dad's funeral, or your wife's funeral, or your husband's funeral. You want to brace yourself for it? Best way I know to brace yourself for your mom and dad's funeral is do everything you can while you're living. Do everything you can for them while you're living. Honor them while you're living. Help them while you're living. Be a good husband while you're living. Be a good wife while you're living. That's the best way I know to brace yourself for it. Now then, we come over here to the Scriptures. The Scriptures teach us that comes upon all men except those that be alive when the Lord Jesus Christ comes back. He says the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, and the voice of an archangel, and the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. In the world in which we're living today, it's sort of natural for people to try to hide their children from the reality of death when it strikes family. In the experience my family just went through lately, we had not had a death in our immediate family since 1950. Now, if you think about that, we had some grandparents died. Had some die in 49, had some die in 50. There had not been a death in my family closer than a grandparent since 1950. Well, none of the grandchildren in the family ever remembered. Of course, they didn't remember anything. My brother Buzzy wasn't born. My sister maybe barely remembered it. And my middle brother, I don't think he remembered either one of it. To just bring it down to a conclusion, I was the only member of my immediate family, among the children and grandchildren, that actually remembered somebody in our family died. Of course, my dad, being real old, he'd lost people. So I talked about it among the children and the grandchildren. I was the only one that had a memory of anybody dying having to give up somebody close. Makes a lot of difference. It also makes a lot of difference when you're a minister. You deal with death and sickness all the time. Hospitals, funeral homes, cemeteries, you deal with it all the time. Makes a lot of difference when you're like my wife, and when she is 7 years of age, her 16-month-old sister drowned. She'd been exposed to death at the time she was 7 years of age. But it became obvious to me very soon that there were those that had no experience with it, or else had been shielded from it. My friends, I remember a time when death was handled differently in this country. You remember too. There was a time when a person passed away, that person was taken back to the family home, and they were put in the parlor. They were taken right back home. And there'd be a couple of days there leading up to the funeral service when the people want to pay their respects would come to the house. This is still done in the mountains of West Virginia, some of the so-called backward parts of the world. I don't call it that, but it's still done someplace. What I want you to see is, in bringing that person back home, after the funeral home got through with it, bring them back home, putting them here in the parlor, in the living room of the old house. You're associating that with home. You bring them back home. The children, the grandchildren come in a familiar environment, and this leaves the impression that this is a part of life. I stood by the bed when my wife's mother passed away, my grandmother Kingston. I was about 10 years old. I stood by the bed, and she was calling me. I watched her leave this world. When my grandfather Piles left this world, I was right there by his bed. A lot of folks in my family never experienced anything like that. I really feel that it's been a great help to me that in the time I was a little child, this was presented to me as a reality. Now today, when a person passes away, they're whisked way off over here to a professional funeral home. And if you go there and see them, they're in the hands of the professionals. It's becoming more and more professional, more and more mechanical, if you understand what I'm talking about. It's very easy to say, well, we just won't take the children down to the funeral home. We won't take the children to the funeral. More and more people do that. You shield them from it, and one of these days, reality hits us. And this is reality. that we've all got to face somehow. Someday, some way, it's a reality that we've all got to face. Remember what Solomon said when he says that wise man foreseeth the evil. He says he's warned. That wise man, if he's got some funeral arrangements he wants made, if he's got a certain place he wants to be buried, if he's got certain songs he wants, certain arrangements he wants, the wise man makes the arrangements. The wise man or the wise woman tries to get along with their friends while they live. The wise person over here sees these things ahead of time. And I close this message this morning by simply saying this. The best old age Social Security program on the face of the earth is God's program, because this one, the government's got to bankrupt. But God's program for assistance in old age and in the time of need is simply this one. It is children that are brought up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. That's God's system. Children brought up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, and precious friends. I've heard it said for many, many years that there are times in life when friends are worth lots more than money. And that's true. True friends in times of sorrow are worth more to you than all the money in the world. I close out with this verse out of the 116th Psalm. I know this can have reference to God's people dying to the things of the world and all that, but I will take it just for what it says. In the 116th Psalm, David says, precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints. That didn't say it's precious in our sight. I would not attempt to make the passing of your mother or your daddy or the passing of one of your children, their death, I would not attempt to make that a precious thing in your sight. But that's not what the verse said anyhow. David said that precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints. It's not precious to us. It's a heartache, it's a grief, it's an emptiness, it's a void. But it's precious in the sight of the Lord, because the Lord has delivered them from evils here on this earth. The Lord's gathered them home. It's precious in his sight. I think if you're real good attention, and we trust that these things that we've seen and observed and experienced might save somebody here from some heartache down the line. We trust that maybe it'll benefit someone. Now, as we give opportunity to members, what song would you like to sing?
Word of Sovereign Grace, a ministry of Paradise Primitive Baptist Church in Arlington, Texas. Paradise Primitive Baptist Church is located at 5300 Mansfield Road in Arlington, Texas. Services begin at 10:30 each Sunday morning. Plan to come and worship with us. To find out more about Paradise Primitive Baptist Church, visit www.paradisepbc.org. Be sure to visit our website for articles, video, and audio sermons, as well as biblical answers to your questions. Thanks for watching, and be sure to join us again next week. May God richly bless you.